Welcome to the Off the Chair podcast. We are focusing on our second episode today, and that is about group practice. Is it business growth or burnout multiplied? Everyone loves the idea of scaling, but what if growing your group practice just grows your stress, your liabilities, and your leadership mistakes? Let's unpack the promise and the pain of becoming a boss in private practice.
This episode dives headfirst into the myth of group practice and the golden ticket to freedom. We'll share the unfiltered truth about stepping into the CEO role, including the emotional weight of managing therapists, the chaos no one prepares you for, and the moment growth stopped feeling good. I really see our podcast as for two types of people, and you guys chime in here if you agree or disagree. So I see the podcast as being for people that are either wanting to own a group practice and are kind of wanting to see, like, is this a good idea for me? Or people who, already own a group practice and want to better scale, learn how to grow, implement systems, that type of thing. And we can certainly help with that. And then the other type of person I see it for is maybe someone that they're not a group practice owner, or maybe they are, but they want to get away from the traditional trade your time for money format altogether. They're looking for, how do I leverage my expertise in a way that I don't feel tied to the chair? And what are the things that other people are doing that are sort of outside of the box thinking that really utilizes that moat that we have as trained clinicians with all of that education? How do we do that in a way that still feels free and creative? What do you guys think?
I agree that at some point in the many years of sitting in the chair, there is a desire to pivot and to assess what other types of work activities one can do to bring in income instead of the traditional, like we've said, 53-minute but in seat session. And that's something I think a lot about. And, in looking at the future, when I was a young therapist, I saw group practice as a way to do that. However, I think I am really at a crossroads with whether or not the group practice helps to fulfill that potential vision or dream. It seemed like a really positive way to add to the good. So I thought, why not do it? When I first opened my small group practice, my partner at the time was in school and we had a growing family. So it seemed like a very helpful way to increase income. But I definitely underestimated the toll that it would take on me emotionally and financially. I don't think back then, over 10 years ago, I don't think there were as many resources for group practice owners as there are today, as it's become more of a thing, a phenomena. So I learned to put a support team together, and I still encountered a lot of unexpected bills, random regulations popping up, and tripped a lot over aspects of business ownership that I was unprepared for. I also give myself a lot of grace with that, because how could I know what I was in for?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a real reality of what we're facing right now, is that we're dealing with some big sort of VC backed tech companies that come in and they do disrupt the field, right? And some for good and some for bad. But where it disrupts the group practice owner is you've got companies that have billions and billions of dollars that can come in and hire your clinicians at a rate that just would not be sustainable for you as a business, right? So it's really, really hard to staff today's practice. And then it really puts us in a position of kind of begging people to stay for us versus being in that leadership role that you really need to be in to make people feel secure. The other piece that I would say to that is there's a great book called The E-Myth, and it's about how it just starts with this woman who she bakes pies, and that's all she does. She bakes pies, and she's great at baking pies, but eventually more and more people want her pies. And so she's got to hire another person to make the pie for her. And then she's got to hire another person. And then she needs a bakery. And then she needs to market herself. And then she needs someone to do the payroll for all the bakers. And so this person has gone from technician to manager. And entrepreneur at the same time. And in the E-Myth, they see those three roles, which is like technician, manager, and entrepreneur. And as a group practice owner, I think we really struggle with trying to balance all three of those roles. And maybe that's where people start, is asking themselves, which of those things do they like best? Do they like being simply the technician, or in our case, the clinician? Do they just like seeing clients? They don't want to deal with the administrative. They don't want to lead people. They don't want to do systems. That's the technician piece. And I think that's great. There's the manager piece. So that's the operator, the person that likes to go in and roll out those systems, but isn't necessarily going to be the visionary, thinking about like, how do we get those big contracts and how do we expand? And then there's the entrepreneur, the dreamer, the person that really yearns for that creative freedom, to create and build something and suspend reality. And when you're in a group practice, at least for me, that piece became so small. And that was the piece I love. That's the piece that feels like oxygen, is like, what if we did this? And what if we created our own like wellness brand and self-help line? And what if we did a podcast? And all of that was gone because I was so busy being the manager and sometimes the technician. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I was even thinking, taking a step back in our field before we became group practice owners, I think so many people aspire to be, first of all, a solo practitioner in private practice and a group practice owner, because I do think it was a little bit glamorized at the time.
Mhm.
You know, I remember being in graduate school and talking to my professors, and to be honest, the track was, do you want to be a professor? Do you want to be a researcher? Do you want to work in the clinical field? Do you want to work at
Mhm.
a, agency, college counseling center, hospital? And if not, or school, or if not, private practice.
Mhm.
And at least at that time, that was 20 years ago, but I remember aspiring and looking at, I had one professor in particular who, she was a full-time professor and she had a side practice. And her practice at that time she expanded it into group practice. And I thought, wow, like she has people working for her and she has this other job that's bringing in stable income. So, I do think we were kind of, I don't want to say fed a lie, but we were, that was kind of our role model at the time.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, so today's episode is going to be more about the former, which is scaling group practices. This will really hit for some of you that are maybe struggling with, man, what do I do? How do I get better at doing this? Can I get better at doing this in today's day and age? Is it even possible? Is this dream gone? I don't think it is. Um, what do I do to fold them? What do I do to say, I don't want to do this anymore? And it's okay to say no. And there's great power in no. But for the just a little second, I want to do a career daydream segment. So this is for the second part. So if you were to get off the chair, and I'm sure we've all had those, I know I've had those moments where you daydream about what it is that you would have done differently. Like, if tomorrow, Erica, they said, we got to take your license and you can't do what you're doing, what would you do? Dream job.
I do think that I have an interest in being an educator, and whether that's in, the typical higher educational realm, maybe eventually I'll get there. But I do like the thought of, doing more group work, incorporating some of the clinical skills I've developed over the years. One idea that comes to mind is I'm a nature-informed therapist. So, maybe working with organizations to bring in nature-based therapy techniques to teams and to groups, expanding the good by helping more people at once. I do give talks in the community around therapy, psychoeducational talks, trainings, things like that. So I think it would really be a matter of building on that to work with, say, organizations, companies, corporations who want to bring someone in to lead their retreat or help with their retreat and help to inspire and maybe also impart some mental health education to their teams.
Nice. Nice.
I
What
do
about you,
really
Jen?
relate to the visionary piece because I like to brainstorm. I feel like I could do that all day long, but what I'm constantly reminded of as a group practice owner is I'm just one person. It's only me. And, growing leadership on the team is helpful, but ultimately you can only spread yourself so thin. So, I have to often stop myself from doing what you described, Colleen, like, oh, I could do this. That sounds so great. Like, or coming up with these really awesome ideas that inspire me and maybe, are a little outside the box of typical therapy approaches or, the typical therapy framework. But I would have to clone myself. And I've been making that joke since I started this group practices. If only I could clone myself.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you really do like the clinician aspect of it. Even in your fantasies, it's about taking that and still being in that lane, right? Like being a facilitator of mental health and wellness, but just maybe in a different format.
Yes.
Versus like, I'm more like, should I be a soil engineer, makeup artist? Um, you know, and we're trying to put in a pool, and the guy said, it's $2,500 up front. I'm going to test your soil. And he just told me when he was going to be there. He walks in, and I'm thinking, what kind of model is this? Like, I need $2,500 and I'm going to go play in your dirt for a couple of minutes. And he doesn't answer to anybody. It took me 3 months to get him. And he's like the only guy in town that can do it. And I thought, that sounds nice. You're just with your dirt tools and that's it. And you're just like, you don't deal with Aetna. You're not like, Aetna, I need a copay for this dirt. No, it's $2,500 or I don't show up. And I'll show up when I want to show up. And you're not going to rake me over the coals in social media because no one's like looking for a soil engineer. And so I thought, can I be a geologist? That was one thought I had. Makeup artist. After I got my nails done and they charged me more than what I get paid for 90791, I was like, could I do nails? So that was a thought. And then, I think the other dreams have been just, working with our baby boomer population and creating like legacy sites for them, but from a psychological bent. Like, really, I love writing. So capturing them in a way that is perpetuated forever online, or creating like a glass door, but for employees where you rank your employees.
Uh-oh.
I like it.
I'm pretty sure it's not legal, but I'm like, why can you rank your employers, but you can't rank your employees? Right. And then if it's just a one-off, then that's fine. But like, if they keep on doing the same behavior, they start to go up there in the algorithm. So I've got all these ideas. And the problem is I actually act on a lot of them. So it becomes analysis paralysis. What
Is
about
that a
you, Jen?
problem though? I mean, that sounds like a plus that you take steps to explore other things that interest you. I mean, I certainly have those ideas too at times. Like for me, I've always thought owning an ice cream shop would be like the best,
Ooh,
way
yeah.
to bring joy into
Simple.
people's lives. But
Yeah.
from what I hear, it's also not easy. So,
Right.
and recently our favorite ice cream shop here down the street from our house just closed. So it's so
Oh,
sad. We've lost our destination.
yeah.
So, I mean, there's that. And I like to cook, and I, in grad school, worked in some restaurants and have thought about that too. But I know that's a really tough industry as well.
Yeah, that was the cool thing about being in Vistage was you were at a table with a bunch of CEOs or leaders, and you learned that no matter what industry, there's always pain points. I mean, everybody, even if you're selling, fire hydrants, you're going through some sort of pain point. And so I think that helped to bring perspective for sure. What about you, Jen? I'm curious what you would do if you lost your license tomorrow or just threw it out the window.
You know, I know I am definitely, I think for me, I'm over the clinical piece. Not in a bad way. I feel like it served me. I enjoyed it for 20 years, but at this stage of my life, I think I'm looking for, I want to have more fun.
Hmm.
I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm 45. I have,
Yeah.
two kids that are teens. My little guy isn't yet. So I just feel like I'm looking at life through a different lens at this point.
Hmm.
And I keep thinking of like, what does my next chapter look like?
Hmm.
So, but I'm like you, Colleen, I have 100 ideas, and I'm looking into running an AI business. I want to set my three kids
Yes.
up with like their own AI business, and I want it to be
Yes.
fully functioning with, and I'm looking into it.
Yeah.
And I created an Etsy shop and I started writing a book. And,
Love it.
you know, I love being in the visionary
Hmm.
role, but I definitely feel scattered
Yeah.
and every time I meet with a business coach or I even talk to my best friend, everyone tells me just pick one thing and focus on it. But I almost can't do that. It's
Right.
like it doesn't sit well with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like the jury's still out in terms of whether or not that's the best advice. I know that is always the sort of standard advice, right? Any entrepreneur you listen to, they're like, you gotta just focus on one thing. You can't be spread thin. But I also think if you've got excellent organizational abilities, you can make time. Like this podcast is one of those pursuits for us. And we've carved out
Right.
a time every week where we're like, this is the thing. And all of a sudden, after a year, it's going to be this thing that's built. And you're like, how do you do a podcast? But you've just made time for it and you've automated it once a week. Right. And I think that's
Right.
what you do for all of your ideas. You just have to carve out that space. And I think about when I was doing my dissertation, somebody said, the greatest way to or the easiest way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And it's like you can't just be like
Right.
dissertation, like do my dissertation today. It's like I got to do my literature review. You got to just kind of break it down into these steps. So I'm still of the belief with you, Jen, which is like I think you can have it all. I think you have done your time. You've put in your
Yeah.
time, your dues, you paid your clinical dues. And yes, at 45, tomorrow's not promised. So why not have fun in a way
Yeah.
that really leverages all the work that you've put into yourself in
Yeah.
education? Yeah.
And there are two areas that I think of a lot. I do think of supporting like women business owners in a more
Mhm.
fun way, just because I know when I'm looking for motivation, those are the people that I follow and I listen to. And I also love cooking. And
Mm,
again, my daughter loves cooking and we cook a lot together. And my daughter would love to have like a YouTube channel and she has in the past. So I think, I don't know, maybe I do something fun and we just cook
love it.
together.
I
You know
love
what I
it.
mean? And we just, so yeah, those are the
Yeah.
two
And
things that come up quite
well,
frequently.
and you see these people like Dr. Mike. I don't know if you've seen Dr. Mike on YouTube, but I've got kids that are the age they love watching these things. And of course, the kids are watching it fascinated because they're like, oh my God, look, he's just spelling all these medical myths. And he was a medical doctor and he's making way more money on YouTube talking about like these ridiculous things that he finds on
Yeah.
TikToks and he just shreds them apart than he would have as an actual medical doctor. And we would too if we got on
Right.
TikTok and looked at the mental health myths that are out there and broke it down. There's an idea right there. Just your Dr. Jen and you're dispelling these crazy myths. It would kill, right? So what does that say about when we see these, really serious shootings and people are crying mental health, mental health? We've got to have better mental health. Create a society then where the biggest brains and the best minds that have trained for this are rewarded more for that,
Yeah.
more for helping those people in prevention than they are on YouTube,
Yeah.
you know? because that's where the brain drain's going to go. So I'm totally there with you. I feel like the next path is going to be something with my kids involving them. And they this weekend were on this app called Whatnot. Have you guys heard of that?
I haven't heard of it. What is it?
Oh my God. It is, I almost don't want to tell you because it's going to take up eh, days of your life, but it's sort of like eBay on steroids. You get
Oh,
into
wait, I
it.
heard about this from Gary Vee. I think Gary Vee mentioned this recently.
Oh my God. It's the most brilliant idea. It's amazing. So you go in and you're literally just like hawking your stuff in your house. You're like, glasses, go, cup, go. And then people just randomly jump into your feed and they'll start to bid on all your stuff. And then it just creates a shipping label for you. And it's very easy. And it operates on that intermittent reinforcement principle that Vegas operates on. So every once in a while you're getting
Yeah.
that sell and it becomes addictive. And then the same thing, you're bidding, you just swipe right, bid, swipe right. So it makes it so easy. And so my kids got into it and it was really cute to watch them. They're like trying to sell their baseball cards and their Pokemon. But then I was like, wait, can I do this? Because I have a lot of product.
Yeah.
So it's fun. I don't know that it's a big money maker unless you're, really moving product, but it's just one of those things that you're like, okay, these people just made $100,000 over the weekend. And
Yeah.
that's something that most of our clinicians could hope to make in a year.
Yeah. Well, mentioning that, it's just like TikTok shop.
Hmm.
So we have a TikTok account and everyone was telling me, oh, we should have a TikTok shop. And I cannot believe the amount of people that make money on TikTok shop.
Oh, yeah.
Just putting up like our candles, our books, anything we have in the office. So
Yes.
I do think stuff's going in that direction.
I really wonder if we're not straddling two different zeitgeists where we've got our old school work ethic that are like, I grew up in the
Yeah.
80s. Our parents were like, you go to college, you get your degree, and then you go and then you make money. And it's like, I don't know that college, like, I don't know that that path works anymore because I'm pretty sure my son's going to just make an app and make way more money and not have to deal with the infrastructure. I mean, that's the biggest part that burnt me
Right.
out in my practice was dealing with people. And all day long as an introvert, having that, like, my circuits fried, managing not patients, but employees that
Yeah.
all needed something that day. So let's get into it. Let's talk about burnout. Let's talk about scaling. And, we'll start off with just why no one prepares you to be the boss in group practice ownership. What comes up to mind for you when you're thinking about, what leadership training or stuff you did or the gaps that you had to address for yourself as leaders in your practice?
I think no one really teaches you how to lead. And as soon as you become a therapist and then you move into the CEO role, no one hands you a roadmap. You're just supposed to, you have your team, you have a ton of expenses that you're trying to figure out. You have your vision and you're just expected to figure it out without falling apart.
Mhm.
And I know for myself, one of the worst weeks I ever had, it was like, and I'm not somebody who cries a lot, by the way. Like I hold it together. You know what I mean? Not that I'm not emotional at times, but I'm not somebody who like overly cries. And I remember sitting in an office after a horrible, rough week. We had like 2 resignations, a whole budgetary issue that we were trying to get ahead of. We had a tense meeting with somebody, and I literally went in the stairwell of my building and I started crying in between calls of speaking to my attorney on one hand and then my accountant. And I just remember thinking like, I built this. I love this. Why does it feel like it's breaking me?
Mhm.
And I do think part of it was I never grieved the version of me as a therapist, as a psychologist that only wanted to do the good clinical work and go home.
Mhm.
And I think leadership is very messy, especially in the beginning. And I think it's not just about what you do. I think it's about who you're becoming during that process of the
Mhm.
transition. And I know we've maybe talked about it briefly before, but like, I do think leadership is identity reconstruction. And I don't think anybody talks about that enough.
Yeah.
We talk about scaling, freedom, building a practice bigger than ourselves. But what happens when the bigger you build your practice just multiplies your burnout?
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you realize that leadership is less about calling the shots and it's more about taking the hits?
Yeah.
I mean, as a business owner, you're the bad guy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I would go out of my way to pay my clinicians well, I'd fight with my accountant at times and I'd be overpaying them.
Mm-hmm.
But they would perceive me as I'm the big bad guy, not wanting to pay them enough,
Mm-hmm.
not understanding the financials. And then also I would do, things like trying to make sure they're seeing the exact clientele they want, decorating their office in the way that I know they like bending over backwards, but it doesn't matter. You do all those things, you're still the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I do think what happens is like you grieve your old therapist self. And I do think you kind of resent for a time period your new CEO self while you're kind of figuring this out, because it's like a dichotomy. Like you're just like, who am I now?
Yeah.
I think for anyone listening that is in this stage, you're not broken. You're just in this messy middle. And I think that's what growing into leadership looks like. You're
Mm-hmm.
not a bad leader because it feels hard. You don't have to burn, it all down to rebuild it better. And I think it's okay to honestly change your vision.
Yeah.
Just because your website says something, it's okay to take a pause, change it.
Yeah.
Change your vision of why you want to, grow the practice at this point. Maybe it's not what you set out to do in the beginning.
Yeah. What about for you, Erica?
Well, I relate so much to what Jen just shared. And, I think I still enjoy to a degree the clinical work. But in order to make the group practice function, my caseload has to be very small. So, I do feel like it's walking a tightrope, kind of, holding the rod, when someone walks.
Oh yeah, they're holding
the cattle prod.
It just feels very difficult to balance it all and to carve out these different aspects. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, is being a helper, an empath, a person that really enjoys working with people one-to-one, balancing that with the leadership role, the CEO role, and, having really strong, tough boundaries around the business. It's almost like two conflicting aspects of oneself existing together. And does that work? Is that, possible? Is it something you can do in the long term? I'm not sure. And I still sit with a lot of these questions daily, thinking about those contrasts in the aspects of who I am and the type of work I do right now. It's a big question mark.
Yeah. And I think that where I got confused along the way was between the difference between CEO and entrepreneur or visionary, whatever you want to call it. There's a distinct type of person who's cut out to be a CEO. And that person usually has an MBA. They've got significant training in systems and operational leadership, and they know they can define for you really quickly the difference between leadership and management. And they know how to hire in a way that helps them so that they're not doing everything, and they know how to oversee that, right? So to create those KPIs or key performance indicators that they can say, all right, I want you to do this, you're my VP, and I'm going to check back with you in 2 weeks and make sure that you're doing it. Where I went wrong, and to me one of the examples of why I am not cut out to be a CEO, is I did a lot of more abdicating versus delegating. And I thought abdication was leadership. So I would just be like, all right, cool. So I'll pay you all this money and can you just take care of it? Great. Awesome. But I wasn't really sure what we were checking in on. I didn't know what they were supposed to do. I just knew I didn't know how to do it. And it got really messy as a result. And I remember one of my mentors saying, Colleen, you can't just outsource this stuff. You got to pull up your sleeves and get ready to get dirty and get in there. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That's why I'm paying her to do that. I'm I'm used to, as a therapist, being liked a lot. My clients would come in and I would pull out their file and we would just get cozy and I would talk about like them for 45 solid minutes, and who doesn't love that? So every single person liked me in my business until I became a group practice owner, and then I was like somehow the bad person. Um and a lot of that came from seeing a clinician that was billing us 3 hours for something that we could only bill the insurance company 1 hour for, right? And me having to have this sweaty back conversation, which a lot of CEOs have to have every single day, which is, hey, could you try to get that done in an hour? Because we can only bill 1 hour for that. We can't afford to pay you that. And then them somehow thinking that that's me being stingy or greedy or whatever. So I think that's where I really struggled in that role. I remember thinking, I think just through dumb luck, we grew really quickly and we're doing really well. And so I thought, okay, well now I'll just bring in my operator. And if anybody's ever listened to EOS, that's sort of, there are two things that they talk about, which is visionary and integrator. Those are the two things, visionary and integrator. I kind of use those interchangeably, integrator and operator. And I was most certainly the visionary. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. I need my integrator. I need my operator. So I'll just go find that. And I went through 300 applications. I found someone that was actually an operator, like they called themselves that. They had studied EOS and vetted all the references and had all four of my team watch them, created a blueprint, onboarded them for 3 months, thought I was doing the whole thing, read Cameron Harold's second in command, put them in the second in command, thought, all right, we've got all the guardrails, we're good. And I remember checking in with her. This was about like a month in, and my entire original team quit. I think they were like, we don't like it anymore. Someone's moved our cheese, right? So my practice manager, my biller, all quit. She was like, it's fine, Colleen. I've handled this before. I got it. She hired all new people. And I said, okay, so you'll meet with them once a week and then just report back to me on how it's going. So every week I would just say, how's the new butler doing? Colleen, I am so impressed with their energy, with our team synergy. I I'm so impressed. And I would just walk away going, well, you've done it. You have scaled your business. And now like, there you go. You've just put the right person in and here you go. And then cut to 2 months later, my husband was saying, have you looked in your bank account? And I hadn't, because I had never had to do that. We were always flush. And so I looked in there and we were in danger of not making payroll. And as I looked under this, turned over this rock, there was so much not happening under the surface in terms of cost control, cost management, oversight of the new biller, making sure the new biller, developing KPIs for that biller, holding them accountable. And I would start to jump into their meetings and listen to what was going on. And I was like, this is all qualitative stuff. There's no numbers. It's all feelings, no facts. What is going on? And I found myself saying that over and over with my person, which was, I need facts, not feelings. And the biller quit a week later. The other person quit a week later. So despite them feeling there was synergy, there apparently was not synergy. And as you know, turnover costs. So, I could tell you a million of those stories. And ultimately that ended up chaining me to the practice in a way I had never been chained to before. And so I think it was a really powerful lesson, one that I'll never forget, and one that I now know you have to understand how to evaluate who you're hiring. If you're putting in someone, their ROI, their return on investment should be 3 to 5x what you're hiring them for, and they should be able to give you a pretty solid plan on how they're going to do that day one. And my person was working with, they'd hired some creative to work on our logo. That was their day to day. So they're working on window curtains. Meanwhile, there's a fire in our practice. And so that just, to me, felt like, man, Colleen, you are not cut out for this. There's so much that you didn't know before hiring this person.
So if you could go back, first of all, that thanks for sharing, because I feel like I think that can resonate with so many people. And I'm sure for you, after that whole experience, I'm sure it almost, had you second guess your abilities and, take a toll on you emotionally of just going through all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've got a great clinical director now, and she's like, Colleen, when you hire someone, or someone leaves, or you let them go, you got to let the team know. It was such a simple thing, but it just, the way that I'm wired, I think, as an entrepreneur, as a 7 on the Enneagram, is, there's a lot of great things about that trait, which is you see something, you do something, and you get it done. But I don't have the rollout capabilities. I don't have the fact finder on the Colby. I don't have that, like, oh yeah, your team's going to want to know who this EVP is and what her role is, and where are you going to be for the next 3 months, and all of that. So I think that is the bigger piece, is just learning what I didn't know. I mean, there's so much I didn't know, but um, where my strengths were, and where they were not. And for me, ultimately, I ended up selling because I realized I don't have the cloth or the DNA for what it takes to be a CEO or a leader. And I do think there are people that do. They love creating those systems. They love accountability checks. They love the KPIs and the performance, and they love all the operations and systems. But that wasn't me. I don't want to have to manage everyone's emotions and have these sweaty back conversations every day, especially as someone that's an empath, that was a therapist
Mhm.
and can pick up on everybody's
Yeah.
stress. I don't want to do that to people.
I've heard this from other group practice owners, that it's difficult to hire to scale, that choosing the right person to be the clinical supervisor, to be the, COO, those are really important decisions. And, you could do all the personality assessments and tests and multiple interviews and reference checks, but, I've learned from just hiring therapists that you don't really know if they'll sink or swim until they're in the role. And
Mhm.
I think that's
Absolutely.
a really difficult thing about hiring. I have an HR consultant that I've talked with about the hiring process, and I don't think it's an exact science. I've seen people that look great on paper, you know, do poorly in the role, and vice versa. Those who don't have the best resume or experience on paper come in and thrive because they have grit. And that's something I've, done some reading and research about, that seems to be a quality that helps therapists in the group practice setting to thrive. But I haven't figured out the secret sauce or formula for how to make those hires. And I've also been poised where I've had somebody I worked with and supervised and mentored and poured into for years, and they, obtain their clinical license and are drawn to one of the big online platforms and leave when I
Mhm.
think,
Yeah.
oh, you're positioned to be a clinical supervisor, I can mentor you further. And then it's so disappointing. And with the types of folks we are as therapists, I think we can't help but to pour into people and to really to feel great when we see them succeed. But the disappointment when things don't unfold the way you'd hope is acute, and you feel it
Mhm.
deeply. Um, So those are things I think about and that I haven't come to a place of resolve about. Though I'm sure there's some business coaches out there who would give me some additional advice.
Well, and you would always hear people say, well, it doesn't matter about money if you've got the right culture. But that's bullshit because you could create, it sounds like you created a great culture all day long. You're pouring into your people and they feel very supported. And at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. If somebody's going to pay them $20 more an hour per code, that's what
Right.
wins.
That's
Right.
true. I agree with you 100% on that. And it's sad.
Yeah, it is sad. What's interesting is when I hired my COO internally. So she was a therapist that had been with me for a few years. And I actually got a lot of slack from it, from like the business coach, or if you read leadership books and what they say, because they say you should bring somebody in from outside. And for me, it was actually the best thing ever because she, first of all, her and I already knew how we worked together. She already understood the culture, the vision that I had set in place. And it was an easy transition because I felt like she had the qualities of being super anal, super organized, into all the operations of everything. So, she got the big picture and she was able to step into that role and do really well in that role because, again, I think she had been working with us for a few years.
Yeah. Well, and I actually think that it's better to bring someone from the inside in because they have so much tribal knowledge that it's a lift to let that outside
Yeah.
person kind of know that. And one of the things that came up for me, though, as you were saying that, was that I got really good advice when it came time to hiring my second in command, which is don't call them a COO unless that's the last stop, right? So there's all these steps that they can go
Yeah.
to. They can become practice manager or director of operations or
And I actually did
EVP.
that. Yeah. She
Yeah.
was director of operations first. And I did do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes and I did that too. I made the mistake of just being like, okay, you're the COO. And it's like, they didn't want that title. They didn't want that responsibility. I thought it was something nice, and that's not necessarily where they wanted to go. And also, if you start calling it COO, people are going to expect a lot of money. I mean, a lot of those people that were showing up for these interviews were wanting way more than what we could have afforded to pay them. So, also, I think how we name it too is really important. And sometimes growing someone from the ground up with you, I think can be really nice because they do have all that tribal knowledge.
Yeah. But to Erica's point, so many of our clinicians now leave,
Yeah.
Yeah.
even though you've supervised them, you've given them all the TLC in the world. So I just think that's just what's happening right now and what we just have to kind of deal with. Yeah.
And it can be the lure of the higher rate from the large online platform, or some folks do have the same similar aspirations, I think, that we had to cultivate,
Right.
develop, and lead their own team. And I respect that. I wish I could
Absolutely.
somehow
Yeah.
impart to them everything that I've learned, all the bumps in the road and challenges along the way. But sometimes folks just have to do it for themselves.
It's
Right.
almost like being a parent. You're like, all right, go out there and I want you to see what it's like to be a group practice owner, and then you can come back.
So much parent energy in this role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mom at home and mom at work.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
your
but I
second
mean,
family.
you don't truly appreciate how much work it is to be a group practice owner until you're actually doing it. And unfortunately, I think some of our therapists think we become Jeff Bezos, and as soon as we become the group practice owner, we just have $1 million and we're just sitting on a yacht somewhere. And the truth is, I went for a year in debt, not pulling $0
Yep.
while trying to pay everybody and working 12 to 15-hour days. Meanwhile, my therapists are clocking out at 5 p.m. They're not thinking about my P&L. They're not thinking about forecasting or how we're going to do in Q3. They're out.
Right.
They're living their lives. And I started to become jealous of that. Like, why did I think that this was going to be the next move for me? And I remember just looking at my husband who would just clock out at 5. And I'm like, what is that like? You don't have to, you're not worried about anything else. You're just like, you just have one role.
There is an appeal to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing is, unless you've got funding, whether you've got a trust fund, you're a Nepo baby, you've got some sort of VC check, uh, you don't, you're in a prop plane, your practice a bootstrapped practice, any kind of bootstrapped business for that matter, is a prop plane. And the moment that you've got one thing that goes wrong, the whole thing can come down. And when you hire and you're looking at these second in commands, a lot of them are used to being very well heeled, well cushioned. The person I hired was a team of 4 in a C-suite. So there was multiple rungs of protection before they crashed. There's lots of money in those big corporations where they can focus on, what should our logo? Oh, I like a lighter blue for that logo, versus, we're not going to make payroll, girl. Like, I need
Right.
you to get back to payroll, like cash flow. We got to focus on that. And you can't go back to the plane and take a nap and put it on cruise control in a prop plane. You've got to be at the wheel 100% of the time. So I think if I could go back, that would have been one of the things that I sort of interviewed people from that lens.
I think I do that sort of type of education with my group regularly to say, this is a small business, to give them the knowledge that I bootstrapped my practice, that this is not a corporation. I'm not sitting on a secret pile of money here.
Hmm.
It's tough to be vulnerable in that way, but I think it's also helpful and in giving them perspective on what it takes to make this sort of workplace happen. I do enjoy pouring into the culture. Like, we have a weekly team meeting that I'm proud of, but I think it's just so easy. We contend with a lot of projections. I think that's a good way to put it.
Sounds like you did such a good job as clinical director or clinical lead. Like, that was the area that you really looked forward to and thrived. I remember our all hands meetings. I just dread it for weeks before they happen, because I was supposed to be the leader and supposed to be like, I don't know, what was I supposed to say? And uh it felt very much like there was a divide, even though there wasn't. It felt like, you know, you would kind of get people staring at you in headlights, and you're all on screens at that point, and they're just kind of waiting for your next directive. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So that was the hardest part for me, was the leadership and leading this team, that I was like, I don't know, just like, don't bill us a lot and keep on doing what you're doing, and please don't leave.
It is being in the
That was
hot
my
seat.
leadership.
It's being in the
Yeah.
hot seat, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was the hardest part for me.
I
All
think too,
right.
in that role, you have to make a lot of decisions. And I
Yeah.
think even if, you know, it's not like I'm an indecisive person, but I felt like all the decisions come to me. So it was kind of like, am I making the right decision? I don't know, but I just had to learn to just like make a decision and go with it and run with it. And that's it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think realizing nobody knows what they're doing, like
Right.
nobody knows what they're doing. So if you're in a group practice, everybody's kind of just going by the seat of their pants, and you're building the bridge while
Right.
you walk it. And so I think you're gonna bring your own strengths, and then you're gonna have your own weaknesses. And for me, it just felt like, almost like if you're in a marriage and more often than not you're fighting, you're like, is this still working? Is this the right fit for me?
Right.
Right. And that's kind of where it was with me in my practices. I was like, I'm not happy anymore. I'm not even looking forward to this anymore. Like, I found myself delaying and procrastinating, and I just felt like, okay, either I'm burnt out, or I've grown out of this group practice phase where I just don't think I can do it anymore.
Yeah.
But the thing is, for sure, if you're doing group practice, and one of the things that I think, if you're still If you're so optimistic about being a group practice owner, then God
I know
bless
we're
you.
really selling it well,
Yeah,
aren't
really
we?
selling it.
We're really
Um,
selling it.
but I think it's not for the weary. I think you have to have a tough skin, thick skin. You've got to somehow take that therapist um piece that just you don't have that filter. You've got that empathy, and you've got that, you got to shove that away deep inside.
Yeah. And the
And
sooner you do that, the better off you are.
the better. And you have to have the systems in place, not saviors. You can't, like, no COO, no second in command is going to come in and save you if you don't have systems yet. You've got to build these
Right.
systems, hiring systems, onboarding systems, KPIs, regular reviews, negotiations with contractors. How do we credential? How do we check in with our billing? What's our denied claim rate? You got to have all that stuff in place. And if you're great at developing that, I'd say you're in the right place to be a group practice owner. But when I say that, if you're like, oh God, that sounds awful, then run as fast as you can, because that's what you're going to be doing. Very little patient care and a lot of systems.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, one of the hardest lessons that I had was actually, if I could go back, I would have paused scaling. And we ended up doing this later, but at a more pivotal time, we kind of stopped growing and we just doubled down on systems because I was
Mhm.
realizing like we don't have everything like, organized and up to snuff yet. But for me, if I could go back, that's what I would do. I
Mhm.
would have hit pause at that time and I would have got all of our systems, every process documented, everything automated, and then continue to grow from there.
Mhm. Yeah, you can't hire someone to do the job you don't understand.
Right.
You have to know
And you don't
what
know
you're
what you
hiring
need
for.
at that time. Like what
Right.
you need or your company needs or your practice needs at that time, it's going to change. It ebbs and flows.
Right. Exactly. Well, and there's a great book I'm reading right now called Essentialism by Greg McCowan. And
I love that book. It's one of my favorites.
you do? Oh, it's so
Yes.
good. It's so good. So I'm not all the way through it, but essentially what I'm getting from it is that you have to figure out, I mean, especially if you're a group practice owner, you have to figure out, what things am I going to do today that move the needle for my company in the right way? Not what things do I want to do today that I like doing, right? Because I could sit on
Right.
Canva all day and design a logo, but that's not necessarily going to move the needle for my company. Doing a review and looking at KPIs and understanding cash flow and P&L, that's going to move the needle. And I want to make sure that either myself or the people that I've hired around me are doing those very things and designing those systems and KPIs so that every week, Monday, those are the dailies for that person. For a down to billing, are you confirming patients next week and making sure that you're getting their copays? So making sure that their time is being spent most effectively in the most essential items that are going to move the needle for your company versus just opening their email and being reactive to everything that comes in.
Right. I mean, now to this day, I typically spend one day a week where I just do the financials. I look through
Hmm.
every account, I look through every P&L, I look through every little thing, every expense. But I never did that before, not until someone actually told me I had to really focus on that. And I
Yeah.
thought I could focus on it like quarterly or monthly. No, I have to focus on it every single week.
Yeah. And some every day. I know I have a mentor and
Yeah.
he opens it up every single day and is
Yeah.
looking at that. I look at it and I'm like, what am I looking at?
There definitely is a lot to keep track of.
Yes, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So hopefully in this episode, you guys that are practice leaders that have that in your DNA, in your cloth, are thinking, yeah, I'm headed on the right path. I do enjoy that stuff. I do enjoy creating systems. I do like being the leader, and I feel like I'm a good leader. I'm good at that stuff. And I don't mind having those, I call them sweaty back conversations. I don't mind having those conversations. I like all of that. I like being in control, and I could be a CEO. And then hopefully we're saving some people a lot of time that are like, ooh, I didn't think that all of that was involved in group practice ownership. And that's not for me. I thought it was more about just getting a yacht and collecting all my money, counting all my money. And it's not. I don't even have a boat. So it's definitely not about that. Or maybe there are some people, and we'll hopefully have them on as guests. But hopefully that as we start to talk about the realities of what that looks like as group practice owner and what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, one, there's less people that are leaving group practice owners that are really good, like you, Erica, right? So you've got less people going out with that fantasy that that they're going to just, all of a sudden just kill it on their own, because they start to hear the minutia of what you have to deal with every day as a group practice owner. And then those that hear this and it really resonates with them, they're like, okay, I'm on the right path. Like, this is the thing that I feel like I'm cut out for.
I just want to say, if this hits home, you're not alone. And we're talking about this and much more on the next episode of Off the Chair. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys.